Since the dawn of time, man has been curious. And for almost as long, the Vibes Broadcast Network has sought the truth. Investigate, discuss, explore. Okay, maybe in other episodes, but this one is just listen to the vibes.
The views and opinions of our guests may not necessarily reflect those of the host or the Vibes Broadcast Network. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. And I have here Mr. David Edwards, and he is an author. And we're going to learn a little bit about him. And this book that I was reading about says you had an epiphany when you wrote it. So I want to hear more about that. But let's kick it off. Just tell us a little bit about you.
Well, thank you. And it's nice to meet you, Kyle. And I appreciate you being on the podcast and being able to tell a little bit about my story. And it's not really about me, but about, I suppose, what I've learned, what we all could hopefully grow together from that, I guess. I'll go way back. I just had my 62nd birthday. So a week ago. And I started with the most average childhood you could probably imagine. 1960, my dad was in construction. He did what's called lath and plaster. Now, have you ever heard of lath and plaster?
I can't say that I've heard that, but I know what plaster is.
It's and in my book, let me see, which principle is it? It's the third principle, is to always be learning. So that's the third principle. But the book has 10 principles overall that create the foundations of personal or intrinsic motivation. But I'll get into more in that in a bit. But anyways, my dad did lath and plaster. So if you go to any really old houses from, say, the 50s back, they hadn't invented sheetrock yet.
Right.
So the way that you put up a wall, and if you don't live in like a stucco house or, something that is cinder block or whatever, right? The way that they created walls was they would put, your frames, and then crosswise, they would put slats of very thin slats of wood, and then they would put plaster over the top of that. And so they called it lath and plaster. Lath work and then the plaster. And that's how they created a wall. And you could, paint it, you could stucco it, you could hang pictures on it, do all the things you can do to the wall. But and that's how all walls were made for, I don't know how long, I think centuries. As long as we had like wooden houses where you wanted to have, that kind of a finished wall inside. And so that's what my dad did, because that's what his dad did, right? His dad taught him to do this. It was a trade, like being a carpenter or a plumber or any kind of other journeyman kind of a thing. But of course they did invent sheetrock, and instead of doing this laborious, costly lath and plaster, you'd slap up sheetrock. And so anyways, that's what my dad did. We moved up wherever the work was. I think I went to 7 or 10 elementary schools, and but we ended up in Alaska, and my dad made some good money for, I think, probably the first time in his life, and became a general contractor. So he's responsible for bigger jobs, and built the junior high school in Fairbanks, Alaska.
Oh, cool.
Which is still there, I guess. They built another one, but anyway, so finished that, and my mom, I think, was a little tired of winter in Fairbanks.
A bit.
And anyway, so it was a pretty normal childhood, but then my dad started drinking too much. And his sister, who's still alive, my dad has passed on a number of years ago, but his sister, who's still alive, she called it, he was fighting his demon. And a demon it was. And I was a little kid. I mean, what do you know what's going on really? But I think it was a hard time for my dad. He'd gone from being a big boss and making money down to doing little jobs and struggling with the drink and all the things that leads to. And I think he made some big mistakes that caused my mom to divorce him. So my folks got divorced, and I was 10, and I had a younger brother and an older brother. And you had to deal with that kind of stuff. As a kid, I didn't really think about it, right? I wasn't self-aware enough, I don't think, but I would get really angry. Throw things, at my brother, like baseball bats and things that would not be good. And it was a rough time. I used to go walk along. Anyways, the waves were relaxing to me. And if I could find waves anywhere, that helped me. But anyway, but in my personal journey, my mom remarried. The man she married was a full-on alcoholic.
Oh, no.
I know. And so they were not married for very long, and things were pretty bad, frankly. And she came to us late, like just before bed. 3 of us shared a room. And she said, we might have to leave, and it might be the middle of the night. And you need to be quiet, and you need not worry about getting all your stuff. Not that we had a lot of stuff, but, we just got to leave and quietly. We never did, and I'm grateful for that. But anyways, and I don't think that these are that unusual, right? I mean, These are things that people deal with. They have disappointments. We have people who break our trust. We have addictions. We have depression and anxiety, right? These things are epidemic, and my family and I were not immune from that, I guess. And so what helped my parents, so my stepdad and my mom, was missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints knocked on the door. Now, they'd knocked on our doors before, but my mom had always said, no, we're not interested. I wasn't raised religious or anything like that. I think we went to a couple different churches, especially when my mom was single, because, 3 teenage boys, you got to do something to try to rein those kids in. And anyways, so, but they said yes, right? They were pretty desperate, frankly. And sometimes it's in those darkest hours, that we open our minds up to truth and light.
Yeah.
And so they said yes. They were taught, and they developed a testimony of Jesus Christ. It was a beautiful thing.
Very.
So they joined the church, and I remember when they joined the church and they were baptized, I was 13, I think. When you're 13, you don't really need anybody. Your body works perfectly. The whole world is in front of you. You know so much by that point in time. And so I said to them, I said, this is good for you. I could tell this was a good thing for them. I said, but don't talk to me about any of that religion garbage, because that is not for me. That is not my thing. I had no interest in it whatsoever. But I was not blind. And some people tell me that I'm not stupid. Some people tell me I am, but
we don't listen to those folks.
Yeah. And it was, it took about 6 months for my stepdad to really fully and completely stop drinking. And this is what he told me later on. And then, good for him, he started in our home having Alcoholics Anonymous meetings.
Oh, wow.
And he probably did that for at least 10 or 20 years, because when you're in the grip of that, you feel like, because you've tried to stop, or you've tried to, throttle back at least. And, some people can do that and be fine. And some people just have to stop entirely, right? It just depends on the person. But, and so he would meet with these guys. I think mostly guys. I don't even remember. I assume there were some women there as well. But And, the idea was basically that, I was in the same boat. I've been in your shoes, and it's just something that I was able to overcome, even when I didn't think I could. And I thought I was going to lose everything. I mean, he was going to lose his job. He worked at the same place for 41 years when he retired.
Wow.
He thought he was going to lose his wife, right, and his new family, and he was going to lose everything that mattered to him. But he didn't, right? And so basically, the idea is that you can overcome too. It is possible, even though you don't think it is right now. It is possible, and then you got to stick with it. Keep with the program and all that. So I mean, he really, it really turned his life around. And I could see a difference in my mother as well. She didn't have all those kinds of challenges, but I mean, I could just see it. And then I could see not only a difference in their life, but it was a difference physically. They were physically different people. And I just couldn't deny it. I said, there's something to this. And neither of my brothers joined that church, or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but I did, because I couldn't deny it. So I thought, well, I'm going to read about it. I'm going to study it. And I couldn't deny it either. And it changed my life. It totally changed the direction and trajectory of my life. Oh my gosh, I didn't even know what would have happened,
Yes.
I don't know. I think I would have gone to jail probably. I was going around stealing stuff with my friends, not in a really evil kind of a way, but more of a angry teenager kind of a way. And, but anyways, it changed my life. And 3 years later, I served a mission. I spent 2 years in southern France, teaching people every day, trying to bring people to Jesus Christ. And that was, as you might expect, I mean, there are missionaries all over the world. Anyways, I could talk lots of stories about that, but that was a long time ago anymore. And I think it's one of the things in life is it's wonderful, especially after you've lived a little bit more life. You can appreciate the experiences that you've had, and not all of them are easy. Right. And not all of them are comfortable, but they're all experiences that they form us, right? They help us become who we are. And so I got home from my mission in 1981, I guess. I had taken accounting classes. I was a little nerdy, maybe, in high school. And, I was interested in business. I didn't think I was good enough at math to do like engineering or something. My dad was an engineer, or my stepdad, and my birth father was super smart. I mean, he never went to college, but I think he could have, and he would have done super good, super well. My English is super good. He was just a very smart man, and he was very capable. Whatever he took on to do, he was as successful as he allowed himself to be, frankly. And anyway, so I was the first in my family to go to college, and got my bachelor's degree in business. And I met my dear wife in Seattle, Washington, and we've been married this is our 36th year.
Oh, congrats.
2 grown children. And so while I was going to school, I was working, because I had to work, to pay tuition and books and all that stuff. Much cheaper back in those days. But let me see, I got married and I got my degree, and I needed to work full time, right? Because you had to make a living now and support a family.
Go figure, right?
I know. And so I was working at what's called a federally qualified health center, or a community health center. And this is a very creative place. I mean, the CEO, was just very dynamic, and And we had like our health clinic, and we had dental services, but we had a home health agency. We had an employment agency. We had a weatherization agency.
Wow.
I mean, it was very broad. And, you know, looking at a more vulnerable, lower income, you know, migrant and seasonal farm workers and different, you know, people with different kinds of challenges. And you know, it was what do our community that we serve, what do they need? And then we'd try to find a way to do it. And we grew rapidly. I mean, we tripled in size while I was there.
Wow.
And which was about 6 years. And so I've done some other part-time jobs. You know, I worked with an entrepreneur who was a genius. I mean, this guy worked at Boeing, but he had a PhD and he was a genius. I mean, just flat out. You know, I did bookkeeping for them. He had a car rental agency, and he had businesses with real estate and different things. You know, he just dabbled in a lot of things. And anyways, I worked at Procter and Gamble for, you know, a year or so. Anyways, so they promoted me, though. They said, well, Dave's going to leave because he needs full-time work. So I went from being an accounting clerk, and they made me the business manager. And I did fairly well, evidently. So I hired some super smarter people than me, and had better, you know, experience that we needed to have. It was the first time I realized that we were actually losing money, you know, right on the edge, you know, losing a little money. And that's not sustainable, obviously, in the long run. So other than the federal government, right, literally everybody else has to live within a budget because that's just life.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we were bringing in some more money, which was good, improved systems. And as the organization grew, they made me the first finance director. It's like a CFO, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was hired by the accountant as a clerk, and then I was a supervisor, kind of a peer, and then I became his boss, which, you know, I mean, that can be, it's good for me. I'm not sure if he loved it or not, but then as his boss, I realized with the CEO that this guy had been stealing money from the company for like 10 years.
Oh, no.
And he was very clever about it. But we you know, we had to have that hard conversation with him and say, basically, you know, don't come back because you're stealing money from us. And he ended up going to jail.
Wow.
For, I don't remember how long, but anyways, we shared the same last name. Yes, we did. And so people who knew me, you know, read it in the paper, you know, this guy's been stealing money. And they thought, David, I can't even believe it. How is that possible? So, and I've had my identity mistaken a few times. I just popped my mic. Can you still hear me okay?
I still got you.
Okay. We were on vacation, my wife and daughters and I, years later in Mexico. We went to Mexico, first time ever, only time we've been to Mexico. We had a lovely, lovely, amazing vacation. Coming back through Houston, going through security there because you're coming from a foreign country, right?
Right.
And they scanned my passport, and they called somebody, you know, and these armed guards come up and haul me off in front of my wife and my children. And I have no idea what they told them, but, you know, they hauled me off to a little room and they said, David Edwards, you know, you're a crook. And what are you doing coming into the country? And I said, well, I don't cheat on my taxes even. I don't lie to people. I'm not sure. What did I do? Please tell me, because I'd like to know. And it was a mistaken identity. Some other David Edwards had been misbehaving.
Surely there wouldn't be another David Edwards in the world, right?
I know. No matter how small a town we've lived in, there's always at least one other David Edwards. When I Googled my name, I just did this for the heck of it a while back. I'm not on the first 5 pages even. So if you're looking for famous guests, I'm sorry.
I actually did that one time and was surprised how many Kyle Yateses there were. Yeah. I thought I was the original, but I was
Isn't
let
it
down.
funny? It's a big world out there, isn't it?
That it is.
It's a big world.
It's a big world and a small world all at the same time.
Exactly. So I'm going to fast forward. So I've been very blessed. Like I said, I've been married for 36 years. I felt like I've been able to be of service in my career. I went on, and it took me a long time. It took me over a decade to earn a master's degree and in healthcare administration. And I've been really privileged to work with some amazing organizations. None of them big and famous organizations, but it's kind of more my size. It's like a middle to mid-sized kind of an organization. Mm-hmm. But I've worked in elder health when I was very young. And it was very interesting in my own journey when I left that first regular job where I grew with the organization. And today they're a very large organization. For a community health center, they're one of the largest in the country. I think they have like 2,000 employees, and anyways, a large organization by most measures, and a budget in the hundreds of millions. But I left because I lived in the north end of Seattle, mm-hmm. and my work was in the south end of Seattle. And we didn't really want to move down there. My commute was an hour and a half each direction. So you're working 8, 10, sometimes 12 hours a day.
Yeah, that's too much.
And then you're commuting 3 hours a day, a little bit more when it's raining. It's Seattle, so it rains a lot. And I talked to my boss and I said, I just can't sustain this. I've got a daughter. I'm not even seeing her. I can't be a part of her life if I'm never around. And,
very true.
We were doing cool stuff and I loved what we were doing, but I said, I just can't sustain it. And so I left on very good terms. I still talk to them every now and again. And so I went to work for another company that was closer. And what I realized, in my own journey, because we have to learn as we move along, right, was that I worked those hours because I felt like the work we were doing was really important. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't making a lot of money. Even for then, I wasn't making a lot of money today. It's like minimum wage. But, but I was a professional. I had a degree. I had, 6 years of experience at that point. I'd been with a successful organization, and we were making just enough to live on, frankly. But I realized that I couldn't put in that kind of effort if I didn't feel really good about what we were doing. Mm-hmm. And I became quite miserable. I mean, really quite miserable. And after only about a year, I left again. And I wasn't thriving. It just wasn't the same. And it took that experience to kind of figure out, because I work hard. I mean, I think it's just who I am. Mm. Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Mom. And so if I'm going to work that hard and take time away from all the other things I could be doing, I love to go fishing, for example, then it got to mean something to me. It has to be more than just a job, just a paycheck. And I've never worked anywhere where they were going to pay me so much money that, I would have this thought, well, I'll just do this for 5 years and I'll make so much money, then I can do whatever I want. You're right. And so I then have always worked for not-for-profits since. And so I worked in elder health. I worked at a heart institute of all things. It was very mission focused though. And we did creative things, and I love being creative. I love the kind of creative process. And we did things like an insurance carve out, and we developed restaurant partnerships. And I could go on, but I mean, and it wasn't just me, because you know what? We're not an island. I don't care how independent you think you are. I love this metaphor. I heard it the other day in a talk, and the guy said, we all have warmed ourselves on campfires or at campfires that we didn't start.
That's interesting.
You know? Yeah, we've all benefited from the work of others. And I think that's a part of what the purpose of life is to leave this life having made the world a little bit better than when we came into it, right? In our own little way. I think that's what it's all about. So anyways,
I agree.
I went to Alaska, or I went to Africa, and I worked in Africa, in Nigeria, working primarily with the Yoruba people, Southwest Nigeria, commissioning a hospital, an outpatient center. And I was privileged to work in Alaska with a Native American consortium, 14 tribal groups that combined their healthcare authorities and budgets. And some of these were very tiny tribes and some of them bigger, but very rural area, right? This is an area the size of the entire state of Florida, Southeast Alaska. And there's only 80,000 people.
Wow.
I mean, this is rural. And it's not like you could jump in your truck and drive from here to there, because any place that was from here to there was a ferry boat or an airplane or a float plane, or whatever away, because it's all on, islands. And anyways, and so I really enjoyed and was privileged to work with these tribal groups and accomplishing their healthcare mission. And again, it was very broad. We had everything from a sweat lodge to a hospital, everything from, general surgery to eyeglasses, and really just meeting the needs of the people that we were serving. And it was around this time that I started feeling pretty strongly that I wanted to be a part of primary care, and in my career, and a part of whole person care. I mean, just the nature of how healthcare has evolved. And I don't want to, get into a long diatribe about something that most people listening probably could care less about. But, our environment is something that we don't often think about. What do they say? The fish is the last to discover water. Right? Because they're in it. It's just there. It's everywhere. They've never known anything but it. And if we think of our short little lifespans, but then we have our parents, and then we have grandparents and great grandparents, right? And so over a little bit more expansive time, we have evolved in Western society, so United States, North America, Europe, primarily. We have evolved in a couple of things I think that are important to understand. The first is this mechanical metaphor, right? It's the industrial age, and it has been for hundreds of years now. And we use words like, I see it in job descriptions, right? We want you to drive change. We want to make things happen. We want to get it done. We want to grow and increase sales, and we do all this kind of stuff, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But we do it within this mechanical metaphor where we all have been converted, if you will, to cogs in a wheel. And if you're a cog that doesn't quite fit in the wheel, then you're a problem. You're gumming up the works, right? And we're going to get rid of you because that's a problem. And so we, in this process, have lost a little bit of our humanity, because we are human beings. We always have been, and I am pretty convinced we always will be.
Last I checked.
What's that?
Last I checked.
Last you checked, yeah. And so we're all human beings. And so I prefer a nature metaphor, something that is more natural. And I'll get into that in a few minutes, I suppose. But so I think it's very good to think about this idea of a mechanical industrial metaphor, which, when I was a kid and, my mom and dad were having troubles, and then they got divorced, my older brother and I, so this was, the late 60s, early 70s, we were reading a lot of stuff about Eastern culture, right? Buddhism and Taoism, and my brother started dabbling more with drugs, and I just never was interested in that. But he was trying to find enlightenment with peyote and LSD and pot and all this kind of stuff, and it's turned out to be a pretty bad life choice for him, unfortunately. But anyways, that was interesting because they have a little bit different perspective, right? It's not a mechanical metaphor. And so I appreciated kind of the breadth, that provided for me. And I was going to say something else now. So we have this mechanical metaphor. We need to move to more natural metaphor. We need to recognize that people are people, and we need to honor and respect, sometimes tolerate each other as human beings. And the other thing will come back to me if it's supposed to. So anyways, so we're evolving. I want to be a part of this whole person kind of perspective. Oh, that's the other thing. So modern Western medicine has evolved. It's called allopathic. So the model of medicine that's common throughout the United States and Canada and the Western world is what's called allopathic medicine. So this is based on a theory generally of reductionism, right? And there's huge benefits to that. I mean, really, I don't want to deny those or denigrate them in any way, right? So the fact that we understand, for example, in pharmaceuticals, that I can take a plant and extract something from it, concentrate it, purify it, measure it, make sure it's consistent, put it into a pill and, get rid of my headache. That's awesome. Or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? We can work on cancer. We're talking about individual medicine, right? Medicine's designed for your genetics. So there's power and benefit from this kind of reductionist model. We've also got a healthcare system that's based upon guilds. So you think about, like, my dad was a lath and plaster guy, right? And then he became a roofer, and then he did all these other different things, right? It takes all these different journeymen or skill sets to build a house, for example, right? So you need framing people, roofing people, electricians, plumbers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's the same thing we've done with our bodies and our minds, for that matter. And so the psychiatrists, focus up here, and the dentist focuses in here, and the ear, nose, and throat guys, they focus there, and the cardiologist focuses here. Anyways, it's the ists and the sub-ists, and all of a sudden we have a system, though you still are fully integrated. Everything in your brain affects your body, and everything in your body affects your brain. Your mouth is not separate from everything else. It's connected to everything else, right? And one of the most powerful things we can learn, for example, if you have diabetes, is that you got to take care of your mouth. Because if you have gum disease going on, because you don't ever brush your teeth
every night,
and floss every day. I mean, if you don't take care of your mouth, your body is fighting an infection. And if you have diabetes, it's not fighting your diabetes. So then your diabetes is misbehaving and causing neuropathy, and it's making all the other things that it has, heart disease, all these things are worse simply because you're not taking care of your mouth. Everything is connected. And I wanted to be a part of reconnecting all of the parts of the body and being a part of a health system that did that. So this is kind of in my career evolution. And I was 50 by this point.
Wow.
So maybe I'm a slow learner, but so I spent like 10 years. We moved to Oregon, and I was, again, privileged to work for some wonderful organizations with some delightful people. And excuse me, sorry about that.
It's okay.
So we're moving forward now to 2018. I'm working back in a rural area, lots of orchards and cherry trees and farm workers and wonderful things. And I worked with an amazing group of people. This is a group of people who, the first place I've ever heard of, who identified that our largest minority population had worse health outcomes than our general population. Does that seem consistent? I mean, I don't know. See, I read healthcare stuff, so I don't know what other people hear, but health disparities, is that a word you've heard of? Or
Well, something along that line. A lot of it is culture in itself, the way people take care of themselves or lack thereof. I mean, you think of like here in the South, we eat a lot of fried foods, biscuits and gravy and fried chicken and all that kind of stuff, is to where I don't know if I can't think of an example, but they might eat more vegetables and fruits and maybe more fish and that kind of thing. So a little bit more healthier. It depends, how you grew up.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? A lot of it does.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but in the United States, it's extremely common, if not normal, that if you are a Black person, for example, generally white population, you're going to have worse health outcomes. So your diabetes will be worse, or more Black people will have diabetes. Or if you're Hispanic, or if you're low income, for that matter, you could be, in a group of people, the people who have higher incomes generally are going to enjoy better health.
Yeah.
So there are disparities.
When you think about, it's like, especially when I was growing up, we went through that period where we were pretty poor. I mean, we weren't living on the streets, but we weren't very well off, and it's cheaper to buy a soda water than it is to buy regular water, or it's cheaper to buy a hamburger than to go out and get a healthy meal. You know what I mean? So I try to eat healthy because I am diabetic and have heart issues, that kind of thing. So I try to eat leaner meats and more vegetables. And when I go to buy the things that are good for me, it's more expensive. But you go grab a bag of chips and it's practically nothing,
Right. And it's always on sale.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Exactly.
How many times you walk in and they got a new flavor of Oreos or M&Ms or something? I swear they're out to kill me.
That is so funny. But you're exactly right. And so we were the first healthcare organization that I know of that identified a subpopulation of folks. We said it's not okay that they have worse health outcomes. We developed a number of, and I won't tell you all the things we did, but we developed a number of programs and training and effort. We just put energy into it and set some goals around it. And we could demonstrate before I left that for 2 quarters, so for 6 months, we had no differences in health outcomes between these populations, 0 differences. And so to me, again, it's kind of like this hope that if you focus on it and if you put some energy and resources into it, that this can be done. And it's very rare across the United States. It's very rare. But it also gives us some hope that no matter what your income is, whatever your background is, whatever your culture, whatever your education level, you can enjoy similar health, similar satisfaction, similar vitality in your life as anybody else. And so, anyways, so we had this opportunity to build a new health center, a new building, because we'd way outgrown the old one. Offices, in the heating rooms was the storage room, and the closets were offices, and we were totally outgrown this facility that was 20 years old or so. And we decided to build a new one, and it was going to cost about $16 million to build this new health center.
Wow.
40,000 square feet. And we felt, I think we all shared this desire, if we're going to spend that kind of money to build something, why would we just build another same as every other kind of building out there? Why would we not want to move the bar, push the envelope and create something designed around our model of care? And our model of care said, you, Kyle, this is my face, but you put your arms around there. You are the center of the team. You are the captain of your care team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And since you're the captain of the care team, you have to be able to function in that role, right? You have to have the skills and the desire, the motivation to function in that role so that you can say, yeah, I need primary care, but maybe I need oral health care. Maybe I need some psychiatric, some mental health support. Maybe I need some behavioral support for managing my diabetes or my diet. Maybe I need help with a community health worker or a class on how to cook more healthy, or whatever it happens to be, right? There's all these services, and not that everybody's going to take advantage of them. But you, as the captain of your care team, need to be able to say, I need this and I need that, and I'm going to engage with this, but I don't need those three things, right?
Right.
You need to be able to fill that role. And the whole system was built around you filling that role effectively. And my epiphany, again, I'm a little bit of a slow learner, but was that unless we can help our patient be the captain of this care team, and by extension, because the skill sets are the same, the captain of their own life, we will spend all this money, we'll have hired all these wonderful people, we'll have done all this cool stuff with technology, and it's going to have just a nominal little tiny bit of impact. And we want to have big impact. And that was what we didn't want to settle, right? And so I started studying. I said, well, what does that mean even? Captain of your life, captain of the team, what does that mean even? And I was studying change models, and there's all these theories about how people change, right? Because life is about change. Change that we initiate and the change that's going on around us. And in my book, because I'm getting older, I give as an example, right, the change going on around us. In 1985, when my wife and I got married, we bought our first VCR, tape player. And that's what movies came on.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very proud because I could actually figure out how to program it to record a TV show on Tuesday at 6 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you had to have. That was the skill you had just to do normal daily living, right?
Right.
Well, at some point, nobody has a VCR anymore because, we have a DVD player. And so you learn to use your DVD player. And then, we hardly use the DVD player anymore because we stream everything now. Yep. So now you got to figure out Netflix and Amazon and all the other stuff that you're doing. Or podcasting or whatever, right? So life changes around us. And if we're not keeping up, we're falling behind. There is no holding still. That's true. So that happens. And then as the captain of our life, we are deciding that we want to do, or hopefully we want to become something more than what we already are, mm-hmm. right? We want to seek greater light and truth to guide our lives by and to align our lives with. And so as I studied these change models, the one thing that they all had in common at the very core, the very foundation of it, was personal motivation. And we think of it oftentimes, especially if you get into like partisan discussions, they say those people are lazy, or those people don't care, or those people aren't smart enough, or those people this or that or the other thing. And we basically, to say that people that aren't just like me are flawed in some way, and that they don't have the ability to do whatever it is that you might be talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And what the evidence is, what the science tells us, and what my own life and probably your life too tells you, is that this is a very biased or flawed way of thinking. That in fact, we all can change, no matter our history, culture, background, skin color, race, whatever outward kind of thing we're looking at. We all have the capacity to change and to be motivated and to learn new skills and to change who we are. And to me, I kind of knew this, but it was made very explicit. And as I dove deeper into this, I said, well, what's motivation then? Is that like Zig Ziglar? He's from Texas, I think.
UT.
What's that?
Went to University of Texas.
There you go.
Hook 'em horns.
Yeah. As Zig Ziglar used to, I love getting his cassette tapes because, that was the medium that he worked in most of his career. And, and he would pump you up. I remember him talking one time, says, yeah, I was going to record a tape cassette, episode, and I was drinking coffee and jumping up and down. And you got to be excited and get your energy level up. And I saw a thing from Tony Robbins the other day. He's doing a big thing. He'll make $50 million, I figured, from doing it. But, he's jumping up and down and running around all these screens and shouting at people and getting people to jump up and down. And, that's a form of motivation. It's much more entertainment, but it's a form of motivation.
It's either going to motivate you or scare the heck out of you.
Yeah. But the kind of motivation I was studying and that I was more interested in is that motivation that comes from within, right? It doesn't require an outside source, because at some point in our lives, we have to reach deep down inside ourselves and we have to kind of find that motivation, right? We have to find that reason why that matters to us. Because until we get the reason why, we have very little desire or interest or motivation in the how. And you need both, right? You got to have the why and you got to have the how. But the how, which there's so much of everywhere you look, there's how. But the why is so personal. I can't read it in a book. And as much as I want people to read my book, in my book is a guide. It is not your source of motivation. What the book will help you do is uncover your own source of motivation if you'll engage with it the way that it's designed. But it's not a source of motivation for you. I'm really sorry, because it has to come from within. And in the very first chapter, I talk about, as you go through the 10 principles, you will have a moment. I know it. I promise you. You will have a moment where you will go, oh, that is David to a T. That he could use this so much. He desperately needs this. And then I beg you as a reader to not go to them and say, hey, I've got this amazing book and you need this, because you know what? That didn't come from within them. It came from without. And the change that comes from without, we tend to resist pretty strenuously. So what you need to do is share with David or with Kyle and say, hey, Kyle, I got this cool book, and in chapter XX, chapter 3, what's my chapter 3? It's about learning, right? So in chapter 3, I found this idea that I'd never thought of before. And it's amazing to me. And it really is changing my way of thinking. And then you leave it at that. And then if your friend is interested in it, they'll look it up or they'll ask you about it or something. But if they don't engage, you can't force motivation on other people.
That's right. You have to seek it out. For me, when I was at my lowest, drinking, the drugs, whoring around, all that, it came down to, I didn't care what happened to me. I could care less if I fell down dead the next day. But when I got custody of my kids, that became a motivating factor. And when I cared more about them, then I started to care more about my health and what I needed to do. And eventually, when I got remarried, my wife was a big inspiration for me to lose more weight and Now my diabetes is under control, the blood pressure is under control, all those things are. I've got more into meditating, praying, and by the way, I have to stress, I am not a doctor, so make sure you talk to your doctor. But for me, when I got into meditating and prayer, I got off the depression medication, anxiety medication, the stuff I took for PTSD, all of it. And but there, like you said, it has to come from within. Everybody in the world can come at you and say, you need to change. But until you want to, it's never going to happen.
Exactly. And so hopefully, as you know, your listeners on this podcast, they wouldn't be listening if they weren't at least curious.
Right.
And so that's really a starting place. There's a little bit of desire. There's some openness, right? Being curious is being open. I think curious is so important that before I left this last job, I encouraged us, the human resources, we had a conversation, I will say, and I was able to convince them that curiosity should be something we put, we desire in every single job description. I don't care if you're in the front office, you know, as a receptionist, or if you're a physician, or if you're anybody else on our team, right? Because we're all here to serve this whole person. If you're not curious, you know, you're closed. I mean, kind of the opposite of curious is like, I know it all, or I don't care about anything.
Like and teenagers.
So, well, exactly. Well, and you know, they're just curious about different things.
Yeah, but they already know more than mom and dad and grandma and grandpa.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and they grow out of that, thankfully, right? We all do, thank goodness.
It's funny because the older the kid gets, the smarter his parents get.
Isn't that true? It's so true. And fortunately, right, hopefully as parents, we keep learning as well. So we actually are smarter than, you know, when they were 2.
For myself, and I'm the only example I can give, but for myself, I never stopped learning. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this. When it came to editing, I found a program that I liked, and and thank God for YouTube. I got on YouTube, and I would go and I'd play, 20, 30 seconds of the video, and then I would go and work on the computer until I finally got it down. And it took a few days, but after a while, it picked up. Don't stop learning, because if you stop learning, you stop living.
There you go. Exactly. That's a great example. So we had this epiphany. I did this research. I had a disagreement with my board, which I lost the argument and I was fired. No. and that happens. And I remember when I intellectually knew about being fired, right? But when you're in the midst of it yourself, you feel very alone, right? It feels like you're the only one. And in my research in chapter 9 or 10, I think, is about our common humanity. And I looked at it, and this blew me away. In the United States alone, every single day, 50,000 people are laid off or fired every single day. Excuse me. So if you feel like you're the only one, no, you and 49,999 other people got fired or laid off today. And tomorrow, another 50,000, and the next day, another 50,000, and the next day, another. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's kind of amazing to think about it. And so what I like this natural metaphor, and I looked at the epidemic that we have of depression, of anxiety, of discouragement, of self-loathing, frankly. We have all of these things going on now. It's the great resignation. So my LinkedIn friends, come more on the business side. It's all about finding employees and retaining employees and, all this kind of stuff. And so we have all these forces at play. And I think there's a couple of primary causes. These are not like individual, like performance issues. But these are, one is our mechanical metaphor, right? We see employees as assets. And in business, one of the first things you learn in business school is that once you have an asset and you've paid for it, you can't cry over spilled milk if you have to sell it, trade it off, get rid of it, close it out, whatever, because you got to move on, right?
Right.
And so with, a tractor, all right, so what? But we say tractors are assets and we say people are our assets. Well, people aren't assets. People are human beings. People's are moms and dads and children, brothers and sisters, cousins. They are the fabric of society. People are what makes up society. People are the reason we exist. I mean, people are not assets. So I'll just say that. And so I think this model, though, treats people as assets instead of as whole human beings, a part of the fabric of a community, causes us to make decisions that are destructive to the environment. They're destructive to families, to individuals, and to communities. And that's a fundamental, kind of fish or the last to discover water kind of a mental model that I think we need to deal with and start to change. The other thing I think that's really important, and that the kind of foundational to all this, is this idea that I'm responsible for my own life and nobody else's. And as we said earlier, we all are warmed by campfires that we didn't start, right? We all have help from somewhere. And so we're not alone, however, in the process, but we are really the only ones responsible for our lives. And so using this natural metaphor, I'll go back to the cherry trees because I love cherries and I love working with farm workers and orchardists and kind of what I could learn from them. And so if we think about a mechanical metaphor, right, it's always about producing more. I want more fruit. That's the end goal, right? So we focus on what can I do to make more fruit? And so we have all this how-to stuff. Here's how to get more fruit, right? And it might be more podcast listeners, it might be more guests, it might be more whatever it is that you're involved in, whatever your audience is, right? My son-in-law works in a tire company. So, he puts tires on cars and trucks all day long. And so for them, it's about selling more tires, right? So every one of us, it looks a little different. Excuse me. And so in the mechanical metaphor, we focus on all that. But what happens is there's inevitably, just like in nature, there are heavy rainstorms, there are droughts. There are seasons where, it's too cold and we don't get as good of a harvest, or all these factors. And it's the same thing for us, right? We as human beings suffer from discouragement. Maybe we're having a bad time, a bad period. Maybe there's some addictions or some bad habits. Maybe there's family changes. Maybe there's illness. There's a raft. I mean, it's, very broad and wide, the things that affect us. Right. Positively and negatively, right? So there are these seasons in every life. The mechanical metaphor says, but we got to make our numbers. It's all about making your numbers. And so we push harder and we try more, and we got hacks and tips and tricks and techniques and all this kind of stuff so that we can still have the same bounteous harvest. But it sucks the life out of our core, out of the trunk and out of the roots of the tree. And so in nature, what happens is the tree blows over. The tree's roots aren't big enough to carry all that, and the tree, falls over. Or the failure of the harvest is catastrophic because it can't get all the nutrients up to it, and because there isn't the mechanisms and the structure to do it. And so even though we want it to happen, it just can't happen. It physically cannot. And so what my model is, and what the book talks about, is that you are a part of nature. And what you have to do is focus in balance. If we think about imbalance between doing and becoming. Because you see, in the process of becoming, so that's the title, New You, right? We are becoming a newer person on a daily basis. And what we are doing is we're focusing equally, not just on the fruit, but equally on the fruit, so the doing, and the becoming. Who am I becoming, so that what I am becoming will naturally and normally, consistently produce an abundant harvest, as opposed to forcing a harvest on something that's starving, basically. So instead of starving our human nature and what we actually are, and what we inevitably can never get away from, we balance them and we grow. And what happens as a result is we are more motivated. I mean, that's the core of what this all is this motivation from inside rises up. So all of a sudden, we're more capable to do the things we need to do. We are better at persevering, right? So persevering is what you do for a long-term challenge.
Of course.
And we're better at resiling. I love the verb form. So the noun is resilient, right? You are resilient, we talk about. An adjective, right? It describes the noun, it describes you. But the act of being resilient is to resile. So resile means that you overcome short-term. So like I got fired. Typically, that's a short-term problem you got to overcome. You need to find other work, right? Persevering might be that I have diabetes, right? And I'll never get rid of diabetes. So I'm going to have to manage this for the rest of my life. So that's persevering through what could be a struggle. But if you manage it well, right, you're going to have a fulfilling, active, happy, successful life. So there's resiling and there's persevering. Anyways, you have greater meaning in your life. You have more well-being. That sense of my life is okay. Really, the benefits are powerful. You will have better relationships. You will have greater capacity to be of service and to be kind and to help others. And you will be more kind to yourself, which is chapter 8.
Which is one of the hardest things for some of us to do.
Isn't it so? Well, I'll give you some. So like on chapter 8, it's about self-kindness. And this comes out of research. And this isn't some woo-woo kind of yoga, meditating, you know, with your feet crossed on a mat somewhere thing, although you may be a part of that, but it doesn't have to be, right? Some people are not very open to that. And so the science behind it, though, is that if you beat yourself up, you in fact decrease your ability to overcome that you're beating yourself up about. It's like a double whammy. You not only got this thing that you don't feel good about, but now you're making it even worse by beating up yourself about it.
Right.
And so that chapter, again, and my book is all just an introduction. So each chapter is a principle. So 10 chapters, 10 principles. And each principle lays a foundation. It's like roots and trunk of that tree. That as you spend some energy on becoming in those areas, you have that greater resilience and that greater power to direct your own life the way that you want to direct it. And to be the captain of your care team, be the captain of your life, captain of how you work, captain of how you are in your relationship with those that you care about.
So what's the name of your book?
It's called New You, Who Knew? Here you go. It looks kind of like that.
And where do people go to purchase it?
So you can find it on Amazon. I encourage you to go to my website. It's pretty simple. I may not be famous, but I was actually able to get my own name. So davidredwards.com.
Wow, you got lucky.
I know, I did get lucky. I mean, really lucky. Because again, if you Google David R. Edwards, a Welsh alternative rock band lead singer he's the whole first page.
And do you have social media?
I do. So David R. Edwards on Facebook. And then I'm on LinkedIn as just David Edwards. And I'm not sure what else I do. I'm mostly on Facebook and LinkedIn. And that's where you can find stuff. And I do a blog. I don't do something, you're so dedicated. And so I have a really hard time doing a thoughtful blog post more than about every couple of weeks. But if you go to my website, a little thing will pop up and says, hey, sign up for my newsletter. And I encourage people to do that. I don't sell it to anybody. I don't use it for any other purpose than to share. For example, when this podcast comes out, I'll put it on my website and I'll say, hey, check me out. I was on, Kyle's podcast. And so check it out. But I do blog posts. For example, I did a whole series on values. Making your values explicit is the very first principle. And it's the first chapter of the book. And it's such a powerful process. I mean, in a period of 2 hours, I break it up into 2 one-hour chunks. Going through and making your own personal values explicit will probably do more for you and your own motivation than anything else I can think of. And that's why I put it, because some people will buy the book and that's all the further they'll get, because you know what? We're real human beings and we're living real lives. And that might be the case. But if you just did that, the benefit for you is enduring and amazing both. I can think of nothing else that will bring more benefit to your life than just to do that one simple thing. And it's completely free.
Wow.
It's free.
Well,
I like free stuff.
Oh, who doesn't? Well, I will put all the links in the description. So if anybody wants to go buy the book or to follow you, they can just click on it and go straight to it. And unfortunately, we have come to the end of the show. So you made my job easy. I didn't have to hardly ask anything. That's 2 days, 2 shows in a row that it's happened to me. I must be done something right?
There you go.
But anyway, thank you. I appreciate your time, Mr. Edwards. And for all of you out there, if you're new to the channel, I thank you for stopping by, and please subscribe, come back. For those of you who are regular to the channel, thank you for your support, because without you, I couldn't do what I do. And until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, and on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network